Family Childcare Insights, where we shine a light on family childcare, the unicorn of the early childhood education field. I'm Patricia Dishler, and this is
Donna Fowler.
And we are excited to begin this conversation with you. This is our very first podcast, so we're going to take this opportunity to share a little bit about who we are and what we plan to do, and we hope you're going to join us on this journey. It all starts with the fact that we question everything, including each other, and often end up with our clients that are interested in, doing some surveys or data analysis, and they want us to ask these questions of people, and we end up asking them, the organization looking for the answers, to look a little deeper at some of their questions, things that they're looking at in the first place. And it's been a lot of fun. It's a great journey. We're learning new things all the time, but always trying to advance that voice of family childcare. That's really what brought us to the table. So we are going to have a couple of kind of additional segments that we're going to throw into our podcast. And the first one that we're going to open each of our podcasts with is just a short "What's on your mind?" Donna and I are, always getting involved in different things and reading things and attending meetings, and it just brings to light, some of the things happening in our field. So we thought we'll just check in with each other at the beginning of each podcast to say, what's on your mind?
So we just finished up some work with the Family Childcare Alliance of Maryland, right? And I think when I think about what's on my mind, it's just thinking about that organization and kind of how it came about, right? It was really born from family childcare providers in Maryland who came together to really say that they wanted to be included in publicly funded pre-K. And what would that look like? How could they go after grant money to really make that happen? And they did, right? They went after it. The first year they had, a few providers. I would say the first year was really like kind of a pilot year, and then they began really a lot of lessons learned out of that, and then developed really what I would call implementation year one, and now they're on implementation year two. But they invited us in to kind of really work with their organization to understand, what their goals were, how they could continue to really do work on behalf of family childcare providers and begin to expand the work, and just great conversations.
Well, I think it's just so empowering to see where they started and where they've come, and to being part of family childcare for the many years, we're going to get into detail that later, of, that you and I have been in the field, both as providers and as leaders in different organizations. Think back, if somebody would have come up to you, 20, 30 years ago and said, this small group of providers is going to get together in Maryland and they're going to get millions of dollars for a project to support providers in providing school district pre-K. Like, nobody did that. Nobody had big, huge projects that include, there's little ones here or there. Oh, let's have a couple of, Head Start family childcare in our community, or let's have a couple for this and a couple for that. But on such a large scale, it was really amazing to sit and have them share their story about how they first started with just a group sitting around a table saying, hey, let's give this a shot. What if
we did this, right?
And here they are. And I think it's surprising to them as well, that they're still feeling in their head and remembering being that little group around the table. And we had to kind of keep reminding them that you're not this little group sitting around a table anymore. You're this massive organization and project. Like they're the biggest one.
An executive director.
Yeah, they're the biggest one in the country as far as pre-K and family childcare. Like, you're it. You're the big guys in the field. And I think that was, amazing for them to really let it even sink in and to be able to think, okay, we achieved this big hairy goal that we had 3 years ago. Now what? Now what's our new big hairy goal that we're going to go after? And I think that was it was really, really exciting to be part of that kind of conversation, to see those good things happening in our field after all this time. So yeah, it's the same thing that's on my mind, because we just spent the day together working with them, and they're going to continue to do great things. We are absolutely going to be having some of their leadership at one of our podcasts coming up real soon. So if you've got an interest in pre-K and family childcare, you definitely want to look for that one and join us for that conversation.
It was great. Yeah.
All right. So today, the question that we are going to kick off our Family Childcare Insights podcast with is, who are we? What have we been doing for this? So Donna and I formed a partnership about 3 years ago, and we are called Family Childcare Experts LLC. And we're going to talk a little bit about what our company does and that kind of stuff towards the end. But we want to start with why family childcare is something that's so important to us in the first place, and how we were a part of that field and still continue to be all these days later. So Donna, why don't you share a little of your family childcare history?
Yeah. So I didn't wake up one day and say I wanted to be a family childcare provider. I kind of fell into it, right? I didn't even know about the field, to be honest with you. Was having my second child. I was on a college path, working towards my associate's degree. I had been in the Marine Corps. I was looking to do something a little bit different. And my friend called me. A childhood friend called me and say, "Hey, I know that you're staying home with Cole. Would you be willing to watch William for me? My family childcare provider is retiring." And I was like, "Well, okay, I think I could do that, right?" And so I began watching William, and lo and behold, a year later, Patricia found out that I was actually supposed to be registered to do this type of work. I had no idea. So I went through that process. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was a legal specialist. And so going through that process of becoming regulated in Maryland, I was like, this is really convoluted, right? I was like, this seems like really difficult. But anyway, I went through the process. Then I remember the day standing there in my living room with 8 children. I recruited all these children, right? So a few of them were my own, and thinking, who in the world gives a person like me a registration to do this work, right? No, right? I was really out of sorts. I was like, I have this license. I've done all the paperwork. I had done it, but now I had to do the work.
Yeah.
And that was something different than doing the paperwork to get there. The work was completely different. And I remember asking my licensing specialist at the time, can you connect me with some other family childcare providers around me that could help me in this new career path, or what I thought I really thought I was just going to do it for just a couple years, and then I was going to go on and do something else. And she said no, they weren't allowed to do that at the time. And I thought, I just don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it through. So every Sunday I would get the local newspaper, and I would circle ads for providers who were advertising openings. And I would call them and I'd say, "Hey, I'm a new family childcare provider. Do you want to get together?" And that led to me forming a little group in my hometown, where here in Maryland, and we would meet at our local city hall. And it just kind of started, I will tell you, it first started out kind of like a griping session, to be honest with you, as a lot of times we can do. But then we started asking questions, right, about why things were the way they were and so forth. And through that questioning, I found out that there was a county association. So I went and joined the county association, ended up on their board, doing a lot of work there, which led me to the state association. And after about 14 years of doing family childcare through this whole journey, the state association actually asked me to come work for them part-time to be their director of public policy. So I left family childcare at that point, became that, which connected me to the National Association, which is where we met, right? And where our journey began. You were sitting on NEFCC's board at the time. And I joined, and we became fast friends. You were secretary, I believe, when I first
Yeah.
came on. I was a regional rep when I first came on. I went on to become vice president. You went on to become vice president. And the journey has become, and I can't even tell you how many years later it's been, but I can't imagine. I don't know what Patricia was like before you,
I
Patricia.
don't remember pre-Donna either.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think what drew me to you specifically, Patricia, is this thought partner that we don't always think alike, right? Sometimes when Patricia and I are in a room, it will sound like we are battling it out, right? Battling it out. Battling it in a good way. We have each other's thoughts, right? And so that, I've always, there's this great quote, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And quite often when I'm with Patricia, I know that I'm not the smartest person in the room for, some topics, right? And so we always are trying to surround ourselves with really smart individuals where we're learning more. We're always taking book journeys together, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But that was my journey that led here, and led to this fantastic uh, partnership, but more than that, friendship that leads the work that we do. We both, I am so passionate, I think, because of the experiences that I had in family childcare, because of that public policy piece. I'm so extremely passionate about the field of family childcare, and are we asking the right questions? And I always felt as a family childcare provider for a long time that I was, I think often we say, like, we hear family childcare providers say, I'm just a family childcare provider.
That word
And that word just drives me nuts.
I actually do workshop where one of the things that we do is, and it's based off my book From Babysitter to Business Owner. So I'm trying to, empower people to feel this, you embrace your business, you're a business owner. And one of the things that I talk about is the word just, and how we use that too often. And it just kind of diminishes whoever you're talking about when you use that word beforehand, especially if you're talking about yourself. So I actually have them write the word just on a piece of paper and then physically crumple it up and throw it to the front of the room. And I gather them all up and I'm like, I'm taking all your justs away from you. I don't ever want to hear anyone use that word again. Yeah. You exhibit that one of the many reasons that providers get into the field, being a mom, wanting to care for a neighbor's child. I always get a kick out of how you start your story talking a little bit about how you didn't know what you're doing or whatever. Tell the people how many children you have here.
I have 5 boys, so in my house, there's never a dull moment and never a clean floor. Those of you who have a lot of children know that.
So, there's many providers that get into it. They have their one child and they start getting, and they're like, oh my gosh, how do I juggle 5, 6, 7, 8 children? That part I think you already had down. She's got quite the brood. They're all pretty amazing young men. All boys, by the way. Yeah, but they're pretty amazing group. So they get a good mama here. They grew up in a good family childcare environment. So that's what love them to be. And then, your advocacy work, when you left family, being a provider, but still, representing that voice of family childcare, that was, to me, knowing you now seems like such a natural progression for you, because Donna is always got that kind of fighter mentality. Maybe it comes from your military background that, we got to fight on behalf of something and someone. And is always looking for that opportunity to raise that voice and shine a light on it.
I think some of it comes from there, but I grew up in a household where I was not really encouraged to complain. My mom always said, if you don't complain about it unless you're willing to change it. And I've always tried to kind of follow that motto that, if something isn't working, there's no sense in complaining about it, because complaining gets you nowhere. But really think about, how can you change it? How can you impact it in a way to make it better?
Right. Well, I think it's made you an incredibly strong person, which is what drew me to all those early conversations when we first met, which was probably close to 20 years ago. Oh my gosh. But yeah, and I think another thing that connected us was all the critters in our lives.
Yes, all the critters, yes.
We'd be on NAFCC board phone calls, and all of a sudden I'd be like, "Shoo, shoo! Stop eating my roses!" And the sheep were out and eating my roses, and there'd be times she'd be like, yelling
Oh,
at the
yeah.
the
Oh,
turkey or
hold on a minute.
the
There's a
rooster.
cow out. Oh, the rooster.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh! There's so many calls we had where you were screaming at a rooster, or a rooster was chasing her. She's like, "I'm sorry to be attacked by a rooster."
People just can't get over the fact that I live on a little farmette, but yet I am terrified of roosters. Terrified. So in fact, won't go outside if there's a rooster out. So hence no roosters at my house.
Yeah. So it was definitely another common thread. I
Yeah.
lived on a small farmette too. We had sheep and goat, and so we had lots of critter stories to share with each other.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It was one of the beauties of my family childcare program, and why a lot of families sought me out is because their children really got that experience
Yeah.
of having, being around farm animals and
Mhm.
dogs and cats and so forth, which makes family childcare so unique, right?
Oh,
Our
absolutely.
families seek us out for specific reasons.
Absolutely. That's something I'm always trying to, convey to other providers that I'm talking to is, we shouldn't be in competition with each other. We each are so unique, and we be through that by embracing that uniqueness. We give ourselves the ability to attract and care for families and children that can really thrive in that unique environment. Why be all these cookie cutter places and try to be everything for everybody? Children are unique.
Mhm.
They're different. Some of them like to get outside and get
Yeah.
dirty. Some of them like to stay inside in their pretty fluffy dresses and curl up and read a book and have it quiet. And I think it's about finding the right fit for those young children to be in places where they can really thrive, where they can be whoever they are, that individual, unique person they are. And so I think it's important for family child care providers to really think about what is their uniqueness and how can they embrace it in their business and bring it in. And I know that you did that
Yep.
in your program, and that was something I worked hard to do too.
So tell me a little bit about how you came to the field of family childcare.
All right. So I'm one of those unique ones that did not do it to stay home with my children or to care for neighbor kids. I did it because I'm a bullhead and I like to do things my own way. I was working in early childhood at a big chain kind of center that the philosophy of it just didn't fit for me. I'm the oldest of four girls brought up on a farm in Iowa with a stay-at-home mom. I feel like I was very fortunate to have just one of those wonderful childhoods. And I wanted that for children in my care. I wanted them to feel that joy and that sense of exploration my mom was so great at instilling in us, and felt confined by only being told I can go out for 45 minutes a day. I'm like, are you kidding? On a beautiful Wisconsin day with a meadow across the road, we're going to stay inside? Why would we do that? There's butterflies out there. So I was always trying to go outside, and was being told that my job was kind of threatened by that I had to follow the rules and stay inside a certain amount of time, and that I need to make 2-year olds sit down and learn how to write their name. And I'm like, that doesn't they can't even hold the pencil right. Why are we shoving that down their throats? And there's just a lot about it that just wasn't fitting. And there was this friend of mine I worked with, Mary Anderson, and she came up to me one day. She's like, talking about this little thing called family childcare. She had done family childcare when she was raising her boys, and who had since grown, and but now we were working together, and I was like, I get to make my own, like, idea of what my focus is going to be, and I get to choose my own curriculum, and I get to decide who I enroll and who I don't enroll, and make the right fit for the families. I'm like, that's it, I'm in. So called up, went through the mountains paperwork, figured it out, and started Patty Cake Play School was the name at the beginning. and really, embraced having an educational environment, embraced it as a business. I very much looked at it as a business owner right from the start. And eventually changed the name to Patty Cake Preschool because I had a bunch of family members that were like, "Oh, we have to take our children to preschool. Where should we go?" And I was like, "What? Wait a minute! I'm doing education of your children. How do you not recognize that?" Literally just changed the name, and they were like, "Oh, good. Step now you're a preschool."
Mhm.
Still did the same curriculum, lesson plans, but hey, words mean a lot, I guess,
Words matter.
in how you convey yourself to people out there. But Patty Cake Preschool, oh my gosh, 17 years I did that, loved every single minute, and it was all about being an explorer. I made it clear to parents at interviews that, we're going to be out and about. We took a field trip every single week. We went everywhere I could get within a 30-minute drive because that was the max drive time I had for having kids in the car. Had a van, had it all decked out with car seats. It was just ready to go all the time. And we went everywhere. Like, I am not kidding, everywhere. We went to like accountants' offices and places that nobody normally, we did the basic stuff everybody does, the pumpkin patch and the library and things like that. But we went, if you were in the yellow pages, and for those of you that are old enough to remember what the yellow
Yellow
pages
pages.
are, pages, we came to visit. Like,
Yeah.
I met everybody.
I think one of my favorite stories that I've heard you tell a few times is it wasn't just about field trips, it was adventures. And I remember one of your children being in outer space and you went and you got all of these vacuum cleaner hoses and you taped them to the inside of your van,
Yeah.
and so you were taking the spaceship to
Yep.
another planet and then you
I wore
landed.
a bucket on my head that we had made helmets out of and cut knives out of and drove the van with the bucket on my head.
And we need to see a picture of that if you
Yeah.
have. But as you got there and the children got out and you were exploring this new planet that you had landed on,
Yeah.
and the children ran up to.
But I think I lived in a small community, and I think we visited literally every business in that small community. Everyone knew who Patty Cake Preschool was, and they just embraced us. People loved it when we came to visit, and they knew who we were. And we had a big float in the parade, and everybody would see us. And it was just really wonderful being that integral part of the community, being able to serve the people in the community. But
And I think that's where we talk quite a bit about the fact that um, family childcare is a unicorn, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And that it's a magical place for children and families to be.
Right. So exploration was just a big thing for me in my program, doing those field trips all the time. And something I've always said I felt very fortunate about is being married to a man in construction. Because if I can dream it, he can build it. And we had gone to a Rainforest Cafe in Florida one time. I had tagged along with him to a conference, the World of Concrete conference. I can't believe that's even a thing. Anyhow, but it got me down to Florida, and we all went out to dinner, and there everybody's talking and stuff. And I'm in this Rainforest Cafe. I'd never been in one before, and for those of you that haven't been to one, it's like being in a jungle. There's vines hanging down, and there's animals and waterfalls, and just all this beautiful greenery and everything. And I'm looking around, and I'm grabbing napkins and writing things down and drawing pictures and going, Steve, can you build that? And he's like, yeah, whatever. And I'm like, Steve, can you build that? And he's like, yeah. I go to the bathroom and I come home, like, Steve, you gotta come to the women's room. There's this really cool waterfall in there. And he's just like, can you just reel it in? We're supposed to be having a nice dinner with my colleagues here. And I spent the whole time drawing plans on napkin. We got back from that trip, and there was, I think it was Labor Day weekend, the like close to before, or maybe it was Memorial weekend, whatever, one of those 3 days weekends. Dragged him to Menards, we loaded up, and we just transformed my entire childcare space. So I had a lower level walkout room that we used as my classroom, And he built a full-size tree in the middle of the room. He had connected it to the support beam so I could actually hang a swing from it in the winter when we're stuck inside and the kids could swing. It rained. That was the best part. It rained out of the branches. He had a whole sprinkler system set up in there, into my sensory table below, and the kids just loved it. Put in really soft carpet of a real soft green, painted the walls, sponge painted, clouds and blue sky. And it just felt like we were outdoors because that's what I was all about. I'm, farm girl from Iowa. I want to be outdoors. And in Wisconsin winters, it's kind of tough. We did go out no matter what the weather. I'm always shocked at programs that don't take their children outside as soon as the weather gets to be any temperature. I think it had to be a good 10, 15 below zero before I wouldn't take the kids out. We all got snow pants, snow, we know how to dress in Wisconsin for cold weather. We go out and play and enjoy it. But it was all about that, being that explorer, being that wanderer. And, the slogan for my school, and it really is a slogan, not just for my school, but for my whole early childhood career, is teaching the 3 C's: creativity, curiosity, and courtesy. And I just try to be that curious person, and I wanted children to be that curious people, and I wanted to be creative. I want to give them opportunities to be creative, and we need to be kind and respectful to each other along the way. So those 3 things have always guided me personally, and I really wanted to instill that in the children in my program. And we tried to do it in a fun, exploratory type of way, and I think the field trips were a big part of that, and even the physical environment that I set up.
And I would say, Patricia, you know, I did take a different journey in that, right? I will say when I first started Family Childcare, I really didn't see myself as this educator. I didn't even see myself as a business owner. I was just really providing this service to, a friend of mine, and
Mhm.
and then to families. I think some of it is because I didn't have a great educational experience, in school. I move around a lot. I have ADHD. And so sitting in a classroom chair just did not work for me. So I didn't like school, right? But as I began this journey and started taking classes, it really started opening up my world to what education could be,
Mhm.
right? I When I first started family childcare, there was a period of time where I did it by myself, but then my sister-in-law joined me and we kind of did it together, which was a really nice thing because we took children on lots of field trips together because there
Right.
were 2 of us, and I live in the Washington D.C. area in Maryland. So, within a 30-minute radius,
There's a
there's
lot.
just so much
Yeah.
available. But also, I lived in a neighborhood at that point in time, and I shared my whole house,
Mm.
really, with my childcare, business and so forth. And so when my husband and I decided to move back to my family, the home I grew up in,
Mhm.
on the farm that his family owned,
Mhm.
that we wanted to do it a little bit differently. I did have the basement area that was there. I still
Mhm.
felt though, and little compelled sometimes to, that education looked like more like a center, and it took me a while to find that journey through education, through conferences, through those
Right.
connections with family childcare providers to say it can be whatever you want it to be,
Yeah.
right? And you
Yeah.
can make it your own in this beautiful journey. And one of the favorite things that I used to do with children is that for my school agers, and I think sometimes in family childcare, we think about our infants and toddlers, we think about our preschoolers, but our school agers sometimes they just show up and they just like do their homework, or they're not
Right.
really part of the program. And I really wanted to make it something unique for them. And so
Mhm.
every year we planted a garden, and my
Nice.
school agers would sell. So they'd collect all the vegetables, they would count it, they would put it on a cart, we would roll it down to the bottom of the hill, and it was an honor cart. So folks would come by and they, purchase things. So at the end of the day, we would go down, we would get the cart, they would come back up, and they would talk about, so did the money match up to
Right.
the produce that was sold in it? They got to keep the money. So at the end of the summer, they got to do something that was really
Oh,
for them,
that's fun.
and so forth. And so just lots of
Yeah.
great memories. One of my favorite memories too is going through NEFCC accreditation, and having my observer out here who was through Baltimore City and had never experienced a farm on her own and
Oh.
just about lost it when a frog jumped on her. But the children were super interested by it. She was not so much. She was like, "There's too many critters here for me."
Oh my.
But it was a fun
Yeah.
journey and so
I
forth.
think one of the things that makes our conversations with each other really interesting over the years is the fact that we did kind of come at this from two different places. Like you were saying, in the beginning, it was your home environment. You weren't really thinking about the education environment. Then you felt that pressure to flip flop it to completely in education and lose the home. I came from center care and had a walkout basement, that I used to set mine up. So set it up the only way I knew how, the way I'd worked in all the centers. It looked like every other cookie cutter center until I had some time with those families, with those children, with my program, being able to flex my muscles as the business owner to decide what we're going to do and do all those field trips and do all that stuff. And I started to really start embracing the family that was being made. I mean, having in center care, I just had children for 1 year and then they were gone. I didn't build those deeper relationships with families, and that was something new to me, was feeling that connection to families, and then starting those field trips where I went into all the businesses in our community, feeling that connection to my community. Then really had me embrace that uniqueness of my program, my children, our community. And that's what led me to, that full transformation of what my environment even looked like. Like I realized I don't have to look like every center I've ever been in. I can have a tree in my room. It can rain. I can do whatever I want, and I can make it unique and special. And that will speak to the families and the children that come. They'll see themselves and things that they enjoy in this program, and it'll draw the right clients, the right fit for me, and we'll all be able to really excel and thrive. And so, we each kind of came at it from different extreme levels, I think, but then found our way to that middle kind of place where we found that balance between the educator, the business, being a school versus being family, and that loving, caring home. And all of that stuff kind of works together to eventually have you evolved into that unique provider that you are. And it's fun talking about our histories and different perspectives that we had in those early years and how we eventually
Came to be where we
closer
are today,
places.
right? And
Yeah.
through our journey with NEFCC and really getting to know each other. And I think as leaders of NEFCC, we pushed our board to really ask very deep questions
Yeah.
at the time. We've pushed the field. And I think what has really gotten us to where we are today too is that even after we left the NEFCC board, Patricia and I really continued in our work. After I left family child care completely, I went to work for Teaching Strategies, a world-renowned early childhood education program. Patricia became a contract trainer along with her authorship. She's written so many amazing books. Please check those out. Just that passion that each of us have in family childcare and for family childcare
I think
and
that's a good word
working.
for it. Like I was saying earlier, you had this passion that you put into all of your energy and all your work in advocacy and advocating on behalf of providers. And I had a lot of passion about it too. And mine just came out through the keynotes and the trainings and the writings in my books and stuff. But we both share that passion for what family childcare is as this unique unicorn of our field. And then continuing on, the work you do with Teaching Strategies and the consultant work I do with them, plus all my own stuff that I'm working on. It brought us together a few years ago. I think it all started with us thinking about NEFCC accreditation, because as she mentioned, she was, I don't think I mentioned it, but we were both. I went through it as well, NAFCC, nationally accredited family childcare homes. And we wanted to see more providers being able to achieve that, because we both felt that was kind of a stepping stone towards our kind of career path. in family childcare that it led us into those leadership kind of roles, and it kind of,
It made me
opened some doors that we hadn't thought of opening before, I think.
Yeah, and I think I just want to speak to that a little bit because I think a lot of times with NEFCC accreditation, people are looking for this, like all of a sudden, like there's going to be millions of more dollars at the door or something. But I think what we forget is there's this internal growth that
Yes.
happens through any FCC accreditation that makes you see yourself in a completely different light. And I remember distinctly the day that it happened. Right, I can remember being in my program, and I can remember Abby, and I think Abby was probably she was probably about 18 months old at that time. And I remember her coming up and she did something and it clicked. I mean, just in that one moment, it clicked to her like, oh my gosh, I see Abby in a completely different light than I had ever seen that child before. And I remember, the tears started flowing, right? Because for me, it was just like this one moment that through all of this work I had done through, the working through the standards, right? And
Right.
getting to where I know that
And
I
going
was like,
from that first day where you said you felt like you didn't know what you were doing to that moment
like,
where you exactly. So
Just
now
this.
having this paper that says you know what you're doing.
But it wasn't even the paper. It was this feeling, right? And I really remember, Patricia, like literally in that moment that I went from like this to this, right? That
Yeah.
it was like my whole posture changed
Yeah.
in that moment of how I saw myself as this educator and as this provider and as
And I
this
think that's the
business
key.
owner.
Saw yourself.
I
So
saw
it's not
myself.
what somebody else saw, what somebody else put on a paper. That NAFCC accreditation journey helps you see yourself in a different light, and it just empowers providers to go on and become those advocates, to become those leaders, to just be more. And when I first joined the NAFCC board, I was a member at large, and we were asked to pick a committee, get involved in something. And so I was looking at all the work they did, and under the communications committee, they had this goal of being able to share the stories of providers that became NAFCC accredited, but they've never had the staff time to be able to do that one. And being a writer, I was like, well, that's something I think I can handle doing. And I spent a bunch of years doing it, and it was such an amazing, rewarding thing to do, to share the stories. So I wrote press releases every time a provider earned an NAFCC accreditation. I'd send them a questionnaire and I'd use their answers to write them a press release, and I'd send it to their local newspaper. And it was just there was one question there about why did you want to become an NAFCC accredited? And the answer I saw over and over and over and over again was I wanted to be the best I could be. So it never said, I want to meet whatever this other entity has decided is the best. It was, I want to be the best I could be. It was an acknowledgement that I want to go through a growth journey. And they achieved that. And then so it was such a sense of personal satisfaction and growth and honor to what they did. And it was really great to be able to shine a light on those stories.
But I do want to say it wasn't a journey I went through by myself. So being the advocate that I am, I always asking questions. One of the questions that I had asked in Maryland is, why is grant money available for centers to become nationally accredited, but not necessarily family childcare? And the state Department of Education said, well, it is available, but nobody ever writes for it. And so I was bound and determined I was going to write that grant, and actually wrote my first ever grant for $50,000 to accredit 13 family childcare providers. So again, it was coming together
Mhm.
with some providers to think about, okay, so what does this look like? And we did this journey together,
Mhm.
and we figured out the standards together, and we had the conversations, and we would meet at each other's houses. We would kind of circulate, and we would learn from each other. I have to tell this quick story about, I often say the best thing I ever learned about a family childcare provider is I was really struggling with the fact that I had a family that was constantly showing up late. And
Mhm.
even though I had a late fee and I charged it, they would just write me a check. It was like, they were making a lot of money, didn't seem to care. That
Right.
wasn't the trigger for them, right?
Right.
And yeah, they both held very high powered jobs, but I had things I needed to get done with my own family, right? And I
Right.
think that's one of those things that I think family childcare providers sometimes struggle with and so forth. And I had this provider that I was going through this journey with, Janice, and she said to me, switch your pen to a red pen at 5 p.m. when you close. And I was like, what in the world is that going to do for me? Just
Oh,
switch.
yeah.
And she goes, I guarantee you it will make the biggest difference in the world. And so I did. So when it became 5 p.m., I switched the pen from blue to red. And I remember the first time the family showed up early, they're like, why it's a red pen? I said, well, if it's a red pen, that means that you owe me money, that you're signing late. But it wasn't the fact of owing me money. It was the fact that every other family the next morning when
We
they sat
see
there
that.
were going to see the red pen and know that they did not abide by the rules. They got them to abide by the rules. And I'm like, right thing, right? But it was the fact of I learned that
Simple little tricks
simple
too.
trick from procedures, and that really led me to this thing of that we have to be a community
Right.
that relies on each other, that communicates with each other. We have to have that connectiveness because the field is all unique. I know that you go through this whole thing around it doesn't matter what the walls look like, it's what happens within the walls. But the fact is too is that we have to connect with those outside of the walls
Oh,
that are doing
absolutely.
the same work that we're doing, right? In order to learn and grow from each other. And I know that I was still providing care when I started my journey on with the NAFCC board, but I learned so much from providers along the way
Mhm.
that led me to that day where I held my shoulders a little higher. So it wasn't
Mhm.
me achieving
Right.
accreditation. I would say I had this village of providers
Part of
around me,
something bigger
right?
than
Yeah,
yourself.
that really helped me get there. But I found that along the way that has continued. I went
Right.
from really having this great connection on my county board, the Prince George's Family Child Care Association, to then going to the Maryland State Family Child Care
Mhm.
Association, to the National Association,
Mhm.
which has led to actually connecting with like NACES and Maryland AUIC and
Yeah.
other things that continue to do that work. And I think along that journey, the thing that we have struggled with the most is a lot of times family child care providers don't feel like they should be a part of that table or are not
Yeah.
invited to that table, or folks
Or
are not asking
assumptions are
those.
made on their behalf. People are making these big decisions on their behalf, going, "Oh, we think family child care providers need this or need that," and so as we created our partnership, and we, like we said, we started kind of looking at NAFCC accreditation. I even wrote a whole course that never went live. Spent a whole year on it, but it was all worth it because the digging that we did to unearth how do we support family child care led us to seeing that there's bigger issue than helping just one provider. We want to do more than help just this one provider get through accreditation. We want to change the system so that family childcare fits better. It's acknowledged, it's respected. It is a solid part of that early childhood education ecosystem that they can see a clear career path for themselves, that they feel supported, that they have what they really truly need, not what somebody else has decided for them. And so that's when it shifted about a year and a half, 2 years ago, where we started really working on our balance survey and the result that comes with that, and identifying our three wheels of business, educator, and personal. and recognizing that if we're going to support a provider, we need to do it in a holistic manner. And we need to acknowledge all those different parts of who they are and what makes them that unique unicorn and that special place for children and families. And so we have to support them as an educator. We have to support them as a business owner. And because it's so personal, you're building these close personal relationships with families. You've got your own family, living in the same space that you're running this business. It is very personal and you can't ignore that. And so there's things about your personal well-being that need to be supported as well, that networking, that communion with others, like-minded folks. So we created the balance report that can clearly show you, where a provider could use some support, and then the process of gathering the information for the report gives us all kinds of great data that we can use to guide states and programs. So we're going to be talking, in future episodes to Ohio AYC, the Maryland Family Child Care Alliance, the family Florida Family Child Care Home Association, all different clients we've had where we've used this balance survey to be able to really open up that conversation about let's not just make assumptions about what is happening in family child care or what the family child care providers need, but let's ask them. Let's ask them. Let's find out. One of our favorite things to do are the listening sessions that we hold for our clients, and be able to just fill a room with family child care providers and start asking questions and see what comes out. And it's always surprising. We always get some responses that are things people had not thought about before, and that we can bring it to the attention of a state, agency or association, and really help guide their work. So we're excited about all that work that we're doing and continuing to do. I'm excited to start this podcast journey with you and invite all these guests and interesting people that we meet along the way. And I'm looking forward to the journey.
I am too, and I hope you join us. I hope you send us some thoughts on who you'd like to see on our podcast, who would you like to see us interview.
The
great
questions.
the questions
We
that you
want
have,
to
right? But if there's great work that is happening in your state when it comes to family child care providers, let us know, right? In your community, right? It's not only about organizations. We're going to have some interviews with some family child care providers themselves
Absolutely.
too, that and talk about their journey and how they got here and what they're doing to impact. Because I think one of the other things I want to mention that I don't think you really talked about is that one of the things that really kind of irked us is that states started to move in this direction that you have to be way up here to be quality. And we're just like, no, there is quality at every level of where you want
in
to
every
be.
sector of family child care.
And it is okay if you just want to care and love on those babies. And it's okay if you want to be a Head Start partnership provider or you
Right.
want to be a pre-K provider. But we have to respect and honor every provider.
Respect the spectrum.
Respect the spectrum of family child care providers and where they want to go, who they want to be.
And another thing we're hoping to accomplish with this podcast is, like you said, we're going to invite family child care providers on to share their thoughts and ideas. Is we know that one of the challenges in advocating on behalf of family child care is that many family child care providers don't have access to a sub and can't close down for the day and affect all the families in their care. So getting to visit legislators and share their stories and get in front of them with what their needs and wants are is really difficult sometimes, just because of the logistics of it. And so if we can, record all of those great stories from them and those conversations about, what they're thinking when it comes to policy, and work that's happening on the state and federal level, we can get that so it lives here, on our YouTube channel. And that when you go, the organizations go to advocate and you have your meeting with the legislator, don't forget to pull that up and have them listen in a little bit and hear some of those stories. And so we're hoping that, there's a lot of good that comes out of this along the way. All right. So thank you very much for starting this journey. This is, again, our first podcast, and we'll probably reference back to it if people want to know a little bit more about us once we get really rolling. But we're excited to begin the journey. And our first guest will be from Kimberly Tice from the Ohio AYC, who are doing some fantastic work in supporting family child care providers and having their voice directly at the table. So we hope you will join us for that and many more conversations along the way. So before we wrap up today, we're going to do a little segment that we're going to end every Family Child Care Insights podcast with a little segment called What We're Reading. Donna and I are both vivacious readers and like to recommend a lot of books when we're working with clients and other folks out there. We like to share things that we're reading through. They're not always connected to family child care or early childhood. We find that you can learn a lot by getting outside of your little bubble and reading lots of different things. So, Donna, what are you reading right now?
So I would say I'm rereading this book. And I would say I probably reread this book once a year. It's that impactful to me. And in fact, when I'm out there working with programs, it's probably the book that I recommend the most to individuals, administrators, you name it, to read. And it's Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. It's how to change when change is hard. What I find fascinating about the book is it talks really about that we can have the best of plans in place, but there are different sides to our kind of getting a goal done, right? And so there's that planner of you. So um, Chip and Dan Heath, they give this great analogy about, you wanna go on a diet, you get it all planned out, and you go and you buy all your food for that week, and you're in the grocery store and you're buying it. But the planner is the size of a human, but there's this other thing called our emotions, and they're the size of an elephant. And think about an elephant and a human in a power struggle, right? The elephant is much bigger than the human. And so, even though you've got it all planned, you're getting ready to go on this diet, you pass the case of donuts and are like, okay, I'm going to take four of those, right? Because our emotions are so much bigger. And so, he often talks about that, and unless you get your emotions and your plan together to travel down a very clear pathway, so having that very clear pathway, a lot of times, both of us do work with organizations where we're really working through this change management kind of piece. And they talk about the fact that what we sometimes take as resistance is actually lack of clarity.
Mhm.
And then I think beyond that, it's about the small successes. And I love that particular piece about it of really looking for the bright spots, right? Because even in failure, there is success. And one of my favorite commercials of all time is, I think it might be the Dyson vacuum cleaner commercial
Oh,
that
yeah.
says, after 800 and so tries, we kind of got to this. So there were 800 and some failures in that, right? But there was a success in each one of those failures that led to that ultimate success of that vacuum cleaner that they wanted to design. And I think quite often we're always looking at the negative. That's what our brains are really focused on, instead of the fact that, yeah, that didn't go so well, but what did go well in it, right? And so forth. And so Switch really kind of leads us through that journey of
Change is hard.
changing,
Change is
right?
really, yeah, that book definitely helps you figure out how to navigate through that.
So that's what I'm reading. And I highly recommend it to anybody. I reread this book once a year. And in fact, if you can see it, it's kind of a little ratty. It's torn up. It's highlighted. I'm probably freaking every librarian in the world out right now. But I even still have lots of notes in here that I write, and I add to it all the time. Every time I read it, I revisit it, and I take something new away from it.
Awesome. Yeah, one of my favorite books as well.
So, what are you reading?
Again, I think being our first episode here, we want to kind of highlight a couple of the books that we do read often and reread often. And for me, that's The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier. You're going to hear us mention his name probably several times over the course of the time you listen to our podcast. In The Coaching Habit, he covers the 7 essential questions for coaches to ask. I can't tell you how strongly I embrace those 7 questions. I use them all the time in my coaching projects. And interestingly enough, I found they come in really handy in your marriage as well.
And your children.
Yeah, exactly. And even in relationships with other people, we borrowed his first question, "What's on your mind?" To open our segment with, because it is such a great question. It gets you past all that small talk. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? Although I do like it when people ask me how we are. Ask me how I am.
How are you?
Fantastic and fabulous. Then you came along, and I'm a lot better.
I love that.
That one comes from my papa, Bill. He says that every time someone asks him how he's doing. So, if it wasn't for his little comeback there, I think the "How are you?" Back and forth, would be awfully boring to me. And that's one thing I love about the question, "What's on your mind?" It just kind of gets in there right away, which is pretty exciting. But definitely a book that has been read, reread, tons of notes in every journal I have about it, and I go back to it constantly. So we'll be talking more about it later, I'm sure, at some point.
It's one of my favorites too, Patricia, and I often quote quite a bit from his book also.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun. We want to invite you to visit our website, www.familychildcareexperts.com, and that's where you can reach all of our social media outlets: YouTube, Twitter, I don't even know what they all are, but Facebook. Ask us questions, get involved in a conversation, and you can see some copies of our balance report if you want to learn a little bit more about exactly what that is and how it works. There's some information on the website about that, and how to get in contact with us so that we can work together and see some great things happen. And we look forward to that. So until that next time, remember to be that disruptor, ask the question, and share it with us too when you're done. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for joining.